What's up, Mets fans? It's your boy CP, and welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast. Coming at you with another off day podcast. It is September 5th, 2024. And in this episode, we are talking about the one and only David Stearns and just how good he has been for this Mets organization in just his first year as president of baseball operations. Let's get into it.
You are now watching the True Mets Talk podcast, talking New York Mets baseball 24/7, 365 with your host, CP.
With the shout to right field, stumbling start for Stewart. Drilled to deep left field by Alvarez, and that's going to win 4 straight games for the second time in his. He's homered in 4.
All right, let's get into it. Before we do, as always, make sure you hit that thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bottom right-hand corner of this video while you are watching. If you want more Mets content, especially as this season comes to a close and we find out whether the Mets are going to make the playoffs or not, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more pre-recorded episode podcasts and live streams as well. And drop your comments in the live section, or I should say the comment section down below, to let me know what you all think about this video. I figured, why not talk about David Stearns in this podcast episode and revisit this conversation about how brilliant and how amazing he has been for the New York Mets in just his first year as president of baseball operations, turning this organization around from the failure that it was in 2023 under Billy Epler to a team that underwent an offseason that wasn't flashy, but was efficient, productive, and now the New York Mets are reaping the benefits because they are knocking on the door of a playoff spot. So, like I said, not trying to sell you all on the fact that David Stearns is a saint. I know that he's made his fair share of signings and acquisitions and trades, etc., that might not have worked out. And we've seen that over the course of 2024. But all in all, when you take a look at the profile of what he's done in the offseason, right, and the additions to, I guess, who leads this team and the manager, and also his trade deadline acquisitions, he has been absolutely spot on. And the fact that Steve Cohen is going to open up his checkbook this offseason just provides him a lot more flexibility in terms of building a sustainable winner. So before we get into it, like I said, the New York Mets are coming off of a sweep of the Boston Red Sox. They are now 76-64 on the season, as you can see on the left, with hopeful MVP, National League MVP Francisco Lindor leading the way, and they are only a half a game back still of that third wild card spot, knocking on the door and steadily creeping up on the Diamondbacks and Padres for that number 1 or number 2 spot. So let's revisit some of these acquisitions in the offseason and the trade deadline. We'll talk about some of these guys' statistics, especially the guys that I think bring real sneaky value and the acquisitions that really nobody was probably thinking about when they first happened. So let's talk about that. First up, obviously, Luis Severino. We knew what we could potentially be getting with Luis Severino. It was definitely not a sure thing, especially with the lack of innings over the course of the last couple of seasons of Luis Severino. And coming off of his worst year, David Stearns decided to take a flyer on him, partly due to the fact that he was a Carlos Mendoza guy in the Yankees uniform, but also just the sheer talent that he had, right? We knew that there was going to be some refinements, and so did David Stearns. Whether he was tipping his pitches or he didn't have full control and command of his vast variety of arsenal, the fastball, the slider, the changeup, and everything else that Luis Severino has to offer. But the fact that David Stearns believed in his upside and gave him this prove-it-year deal, and now he's an automatic, or I should say, more than likely an automatic, in my mind, re-sign candidate to fill in a rotation that's going to have a lot of free agents and fill one of these spots to build a stable rotation. That speaks volumes to the fact that David Stearns knew that this offseason, again, wasn't going to be flashy. He knew he was going to be giving out a bunch of 1-year deals or maybe 2-year deals with an opt-out like Sean Manaea, who we'll talk about here in just a second. But he can make the most of it by bringing in guys that he has studied and he believes in. And these top 2 guys on the right-hand side of your screen were certainly falling into that category. So Luis Severino has been great, especially in the absence of a rotation that didn't have Kodai Senga. And he has definitely fit the mold of, I guess, a quote unquote co-ace. I think if the Mets sign him, he's going to be falling into more of that starting pitcher 2 or 3 category, especially depending on what happens with the next guy, Sean Manaea. But nonetheless, definitely would like to see Luis Severino back. And Sean Manaea, what more can we say about Sean Manaea? I dropped a full episode talking about his mechanics adjustments and his pitch selection adjustments. I will link that video that's on my channel down in the comment section down below, or the description down below, I should say. Make sure you go ahead and check that out. But Sean Manaea is absolutely pitching beautifully. He's 11-5 with a 3.35 ERA. He is also pitching like a co-ace as well, and he is definitely going to be opting out of his deal. David Stearns saw the progressions that Sean Manaea kind of had. Obviously, he went to the pitching lab, got his velo up, etc., but also the success that he had in the bullpen for the San Francisco Giants. Inevitably and presumably, David Stearns saw that and was like, listen, if we get him in the hands of this organization, the pitching lab, and maybe even a guy that the Mets fans love to kill in Jeremy Hefner, but perhaps deserves some credit for Luis Severino and Sean Manaea's bounce-back seasons, this was the perfect storm in terms of fitting him back into this rotation, a rotation that they didn't know they were going to have Kodai Senga, but a rotation that wasn't going to be flashy, so to speak, especially after missing out on Yoshinobu Yamamoto in the offseason. And we can go up and down this list in terms of the value that David Stearns got. Obviously, we'll be talking about Danny Young here in just a second, who was a guy that the Mets acquired on a minor league contract and now is pitching meaningful innings for the New York Mets here in early September as they try to fight their way into a playoff spot. This was beautiful execution. And like I said, I understand there was a plethora of offseason moves that David Stearns didn't hit on. A couple of guys to name was the second guy in the Tyrone Taylor trade, the guy that you see on your screen here, Adrian Hauser, who is now not on the team, a guy like maybe a Jake Diekman or a guy like Joey Wendell. I know that there are a bunch of acquisitions in this offseason that David Stearns didn't hit on, but at the end of the day, when you take a look at the overall profile, it was a beautifully executed offseason because all of these guys on the right-handed side of your screen are contributing at a high and large volume for this Mets club right now. So the trade deadline is more of the same. Obviously, it was focused more in terms of the pitching, with Paul Blackburn kind of solidifying that rotation. Obviously, he got hurt and he's kind of bouncing his way back with the rehab starts. But Paul Blackburn was a great acquisition for the New York Mets. And I think that he is going to have a solid role on this team, especially having the flexibility of booting a Tyler McGill back to the minor leagues. But nonetheless, what I really wanted to talk about here at the trade deadline, because it just so happened that I was on vacation when the Mets made these moves at the trade deadline. I really wanted to be on this channel talking about it. It was killing me, but unfortunately, I was on the road and I couldn't make any episodes or do any live streams. Jesse Winker, what an acquisition that guy has been. A lot of people, with the way the Mets were looking like at that time, were like, well, he's probably going to be a bench bat, but he has turned himself into an everyday or almost everyday type player for the New York Mets, and I could not be more happy. And he has truly bought into the hype and the energy surrounding Citi Field and this team as they fight towards the playoffs. And obviously here the bullpen was the main concentration. The bullpen this whole season has undergone a bunch of different sort of turmoil events with suspensions, with, I guess, glove throws, with injuries, everything in between. The bullpen has found a way to go ahead and weather that storm. And that is thanks to acquisitions like an Alex Young, an acquisition like a Danny Young stepping up in those guys' absence during those hard times, Reed Garrett and Daniel Nunez coming out of nowhere, but also the reinforcements that David Stearns brought in a Phil Maton, a Huascar Brazaban, and a Ryan Stanek. So let's just take a look at real quick before we close out this podcast, right? And I know I'm talking about these players and what they mean to this team, but like I said, the main goal of this episode is to just appreciate, step back on a Mets off day and appreciate that the New York Mets are in great hands with someone that is leading this organization in a smart and methodical way that also has the flexibility upcoming with Steve Cohen's pockets and them opening up, and that is David Stearns. We are here to appreciate David Stearns because look on your screen. These acquisitions, signings, and trades alike, right? You have trades here on this this side of the screen and signings on this side of the screen. Look at the production that these guys have brought the New York Mets, whether they've been here for the full year, right? And JD Martinez, a guy like Sean Manaea, and a guy like Danny Young, or whether they are here for the second half of the season after the trade deadline and Jesse Winker, Phil Maton, and Alex Young. These guys are producing, and some of these signings, right? Jesse Winker and JD Martinez, we probably knew what we were getting out of those guys. Maybe even a Phil Maton. But when you take a look at some of the more underrated acquisitions under this David Stearns, this new era David Stearns Mets-led ball club, Alex Young, a waiver wire pickup, right? Coming over from the San Francisco Giants. Mets needed bullpen help, especially the lefty with Jake Diekman leaving and getting DFA'd. Alex Young. He's only pitched in a small sample size of outings so far, but you see here the success. 1.13 ERA, a fantastic FIP, 1.13 WHIP, no home runs given up in those 8 innings. And his counterpart, the other lefty, Danny Young, a lot more sample size to him, has bounced back and forth between the minors and the majors this season, depending on what the Mets needed at that particular time. 32 and 1/3 innings pitched, 2.78 ERA. The FIP is fantastic. The WHIP is fantastic. And he's got a 12.0 strikeouts per 9 rate. And that is absolutely just phenomenal. I cannot tell you enough about the way that both of these lefties have come into this organization and stepped up in the absence and the unfortunate injury that happened to Brooks Raley. Fantastic job. Not only by the players, but like I said, David Stearns in terms of finding these value type guys in terms of filling in for an injured Brooks Raley that the Mets lost for the whole season. So obviously Jesse Winker as a New York Met, a lot of people, I needed to pump the brakes on a lot of people's skepticism and criticism of the Jesse Winker performance, especially in his first week or week and a half as a New York Met. Everybody was jumping off the bandwagon. They're like, why did the Mets bring this guy in? You know what? I love Jesse Winker. I loved his game. I love the fieriness of Jesse Winker and the trolling even that he did when he was a Cincinnati Red way back in the day, waving at fans. And he has fully embraced New York, this team, this organization. And he even said it, I believe this past offseason when he was kind of interviewed, or maybe when he was a national, he was talking about the New York Mets in such a positive light, and it just kind of seemed like this fit and this marriage between the Mets and Jesse Winker, it was kind of like fate. And you see here, the Mets are reaping the benefits of this Jesse Winker acquisition. 306 in the batting average category, 341 on base percentage, over an 800 OPS. People were adding me on X saying, well, look at his OPS. It's 632. This was weeks ago before he finally turned it on. I said, just hold on. Slow your roll. The extra base hits are coming. The home runs are coming. The timely hits, the OPS is going to go up. You see here, 8 extra base hits, 5 doubles, 3 home runs, 13 RBIs in his 30 games as a New York Met. He is providing a solidified, I guess, production level, right? And I guess I'm not a fan of him batting 5th consistently. I think of him more of as like a 6 or 7 type bat. But if he's going to be in the middle of the lineup, I'm fully entrusting in that because I think he's capable. And I think that this Mets team, this bench, and this starting unit, no matter who you throw in there, if you're Carlos Mendoza, is capable of succeeding no matter where each player is hitting at in the order. Minus Francisco Lindor. He needs to be a leadoff hitter through and through. You're not going to change that. But everybody else, you've seen this lineup change and switch around so many times. Jesse Winker has batted, I believe, 2nd one time. He's batted in the 3 hole. He's batted in the 5 hole. And that's perfectly okay because the Mets are flexible and versatile enough to allow Carlos Mendoza to do that. Phil Maton, another guy that's been absolutely spectacular for the New York Mets. And he was that early acquisition a couple of weeks before the actual trade deadline ended, where the Mets needed badly bullpen help. David Stearns understood that. He went to a team that is notorious for fleecing other teams in trades, the Tampa Bay Rays, and he got tremendous value for Phil Maton, a veteran, experienced righty out of the bullpen. And I believe he only gave up cash considerations. That was the talking point. We were trying to figure out whether it was a low-end prospect or cash consideration back to Tampa. I believe it was only cash considerations, but I'll fact check myself on that after I record this episode. JD Martinez obviously hasn't had the phenomenal, spectacular season, right, so far that everyone expected, but he wasn't brought in here to be a main piece of this lineup. I've said that time and time again. His production is okay for what the Mets have brought him in to do inevitably. 252 batting average, 336 OBP, OPS just under 800, 16 home runs, and 65 RBIs. That is decent enough production for the rest of the guys, the core, Lindor, Pete, Nimmo, to be able to lead the way. So I love the signing when it happened. I was skeptical that it was going to happen, but JD Martinez is a New York Met, and we'll see if he is also a re-sign candidate. I would assume he isn't going to be, but you never know. You absolutely never know. His leadership through and through as well have just provided light years of, ease and peace of mind for the New York Mets as well. When we were kind of wondering who's going to step up and be that leader, inevitably it was Francisco Lindor, and rightfully so. He should be a team captain, but JD Martinez was kind of the first to lead that charge in terms of going to other guys during batting practice, etc., and kind of fitting that mold when the Mets were struggling. So kudos to him. But we cannot talk about statistics and guys that are having bounce back seasons without talking about the likes of Sean Manaea. Wow. Sean Manaea deserves every praise that he is getting this season. Every praise. Yes, he had a little bit of a rocky start. Yes, he was still trying to tweak some stuff in his mechanics, which were greatly influenced by Chris Sale, as he said so himself. But he has really come in clutch and timely with these quality starts, these above average elite starts that he's turning in for the New York Mets when this rotation has needed him the most. 11-5 win-loss record, 3.35 ERA. Again, the FIP in the mid to high threes is fantastic. 1.12 whip and a 9.2 strikeouts per nine rate for 2024 in Sean Manaea. Again, I'm going to shameless plug the episode I did on Sean Manaea. Links in the description down below. You really get a great insight, right? I went and looked at freeze by freeze frames of Sean Manaea from earlier this season to just recently within the last month. And the slight mechanical tweaks that he has made all the difference in the world to the type of starts that he is now turning out for the New York Mets. So, like I said, all in all, this episode, I'm talking about how great these guys have been, but this is a testament to David Stearns believing in these guys, utilizing this offseason to kind of reset the salary cap, but also providing the flexibility of the Mets to be playoff contenders, which is what they are. And a lot of fans came into this season not believing in that. Myself, not one of them. I had them competing for the wild card. I had them at 85 wins, and they are more than on pace to hit that target. So like I said, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Let me know what you think in the comments section of David Stearns down below. Whether you were always a believer or whether you were skeptical at first, depending on how the offseason went, and now are turning into a believer. I think that the vast majority of Mets fans, unless you're so locked into this garbage bin, small market Stearns narrative, a lot of fans on the other side of the fence at the time are starting to come on over and appreciate everything that David Stearns has done. And the guy on your screen, he is the one that couldn't be happier about this all in Steve Cohen. He's finally got his guy to take this team to the next level and potentially finally fulfill that promise of a World Series that he had mentioned upon taking over and buying this team. So as always, guys, off-season pod or off-day, not off-season, off-day pod in the books. Like I said, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. Let's go Mets, and see you all in the next live stream. Peace.
Thank you for watching the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tapping on that notifications button and checking out all the latest content on the channel. Thank you.